Hello.
Hey Mike, how's it going?
Going good. Is it Brad?
Yeah,
Hey man, how you doing?
I'm doing great, man. It's really great to have
Great.
you on the show. I appreciate you, man. It's really an honor.
Thank
Um,
you.
and yeah, man, I'm looking forward to picking your brain a little bit about music, but I'm excited to talk about the new record. I mean, it sounds fantastic. It's my first time hearing Michael Zilber, Matt Clark, and Peter Barchet, but I love the chemistry you guys have. Um,
Yeah, it seems to be. It felt just like you're hearing it when we went in to do it. Everything was pretty much a first take, except maybe one, and no editing. We didn't do any, no Pro Tools. We just hit it, and there it is.
yeah.
Old school. We did the whole thing in about 6 hours.
So
So
uh,
yeah, man.
So what's
And
the backstory? Like, how did you two, you and Michael Zilber, you've known each other for a while, right? I was trying to read up on it a little bit, but it was hard to get an exact feel of when you two first linked up. But has this been a while coming, or was this a more recent plan that you guys had?
Well, we've been friends for a long time, and Barchet and I go back to like 1973 together. I've known him forever. Matt, that was my first time playing with him. I think I might have played. I sat in somewhere with him once before, but I had heard him play a couple of times when I wasn't on the gig, and I was impressed. I'm like, well, here's a dude in the Bay Area that can bring it New York style,
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so I had to remember. Naturally, he stood out like a sore thumb. So, but like I say, Barchet and I had done. We made a record with Mark Levine, and we'd made 3 or 4 records and played a million gigs together. Now, Mike and I guess we've known each other about 10, 12 years, and we always loved playing together. He's from Canada, but he was here in New York for quite a while, and then got a teaching college gig and moved out to the Bay Area. So, and he's been making big band records along with jazz records. Along with like quartet, quintet type of stuff,
yeah,
whatever. And so we had done Coomba Jazz, San Jose Jazz Festival. I called those guys for the gig. And then they called me. Michael called me for a couple of gigs he had. And then we did a clinic at Diablo Valley College, clinic / performance. So he said, well, man, there's a great studio over on 19th and Broadway in Oakland. And since you're here, let's just go in and see what happens. So we'd been playing this music now on about 4 or 5 gigs,
yeah.
and so we just walked in the studio and hit it. And then we just it sat in the can for about a year. And one day I was going through my Dropbox, and I listened to everything carefully. And I said, man, I like this record, man. It swings, and everybody's speaking clearly to each other. Nobody, not one guy's not gorilla in the stuff, as Herbie used to say,
Yeah.
And we're all, it's an open thing, but yet it's got changes and it's swinging. So I'm like, let me send this to a couple of cats. So the first guy I sent it to was Francois at Sunnyside. He wrote me back in about 10 minutes and said, let's do it. So I'm like, yep. So we passed over Chartbound and on Jazz Radio, and we're number 4, moved past Chartbound right to number 48. So we'll see every Thursday, things move up or down. So we'll see what happens this far. I hope everybody's hearing it, because I think it's an encouraging record, not because I want everybody to listen to me. I'm way past that age and that mentality.
Yeah.
Yeah, man, it's I think it's a joyful record, and it's fun to listen to if you're a jazz fan. And there's a funky thing on there on Passion Jams if you're a funk fan. My kind of crazy funk and not pocket stuff.
Yeah,
But,
yeah.
yeah. Anyway, that's my 2 cents on it,
Yeah, I mean, I'm just excited to see how much you've been putting out in the past few years, because I mean, you've had such a long and successful career, but you're still going strong. I mean, I was a big fan of the Live at the Iridium record you did a couple of years ago, and stuff you've been doing. You did a record the past few years with Eddie Henderson, and just every year you've been putting out great stuff. So it's really great to be talking to you about it, and I hope I get to check out this new group live at some point if you guys book some more shows eventually. But
Well, we're booked for the SF Jazz Festival in November. San Francisco Jazz, not festival, I forget what they call it. SF Jazz, period.
yeah,
And Nakumba and Bach Dynamite. So we'll be out there on the West Coast doing some shows those shows in November. My website is drummer Mike Clark
Yeah.
.com, and I'm going to put the stuff up pretty soon. What I'm doing is I'm trying to keep it as current as possible.
Yeah.
You know, I did want to mention this, and then we can go into whatever you would like to talk about. I have another one coming out this month. I'm not the leader. Leon Lee Dorsey, who we made a nice record with Harold Mayburn, his last record, in fact, trio record. We have one coming out with Manny Valera called Freedom Jazz Dance. Sorry, I'm hemming and hawing. I'm trying to stay up with. Yeah. I should know the records I'm on, right?
Well, you're releasing so many. I'm sure it's hard to keep it straight.
It actually is. Another one we released called Michael Wolf and Leon and I did a co-leader album of Sgt. Pepper. 8 of the Beatles tunes from Sgt. Pepper, man, and their BGO still plays Lovely Rita like almost every day. It's great.
Yeah.
We didn't stretch out. We just played kind of straight swing and took it easy and just played pocket. And so the people like the record. It's a feel-good record. So, anyway, yeah, so I'm trucking right along, man. I just got back from Donald Harris, and I co-led a great, a really cool organ trio at the Jazz Kitchen in Indianapolis like about a week ago. And before that, Donald and I and Fred Wesley did a gig in Chicago, which was a groove. It was with Robert Walter on organ, and Fred and Donald and myself, and a Bay Area guitarist, Will Bernard, who's doing pretty well these days, doing quite well. And so it was a great band. It was a hell of a band. No rehearsal. And, we played Funky Good Time and House Party.
Yeah.
And man, it was swinging like a big dog, man. Everybody was all happy.
Man, I mean, all the lineups you've been posting about, I mean, I see you posting on Facebook a lot, and a lot of the people you've been playing with recently, it's got me hungering to, get out more. I'm from upstate New York, and it's, I've been meaning to get down to the city more. I see you there sometimes, but just, I wish I could get out to all the places you've been going, because I've been seeing you post about so many cool things. I mean, you've been doing you were doing some Headhunter stuff again recently too, right?
We went down to Baltimore to the Keystone Baltimore, Todd Barkin's place, and we did Donald Harrison, Bill Summers, and organist Jerry Z and myself did 2 nights down there. The Headhunter, we played the Headhunters book, and we are actually the Headhunters.
Yeah.
That's Bill and I took over the leadership, and Donald is also like a co-leader himself, and then Jerry plays organ, so it's an organ group, and and we don't just play Headhunter stuff. We play monk tunes, whatever.
Oh yeah.
It's cool. So.
Yeah.
Oh, and also, I want to briefly mention this young organ player named Kendall Keys Carter, and he's from Louisville, and he's the guy that played the Jazz Kitchen Indianapolis gig with Donald and I. Man, this dude is bad, bro. Check him out. Kendall Carter. He's an amazing organ player.
Yeah, I think I just saw you post about him the other day. I followed him, but I got to dig into more of his stuff because I hadn't heard of him before that.
I hadn't either, man, and what a pleasant surprise. I mean, this dude, it wasn't just that he played well, he lit it up, man.
Yeah.
So me and Donald were like, yep, it's very cool.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to checking some out, and I'm glad to see you playing with Jerry Z, too. I saw him recently with Oz Noy upstate, and he was killing, man. It was my first time seeing him, and like I said, you're always got killer lineups, so I gotta make it out to a show soon.
Well, I'll keep in touch. When something happens around New York or upstate, sometimes I know. Where did you see Jerry and them? I forget the name of that. I played there quite a few times too.
Yeah, it's where is it? It's near like Woodstock. What's it called? Was it the Falcon? I think
the Falcon Theater. Yeah, I love playing there. Maybe I'll call him and see if I can get something going up there, and I'll let you know. I'll try to get a good lineup and see what can happen. You know what I mean?
Awesome. Yeah.
That'd be cool.
Yeah. Either way, I'm trying to make it down to the city more. So if you don't seek me out, I'm coming. I gotta check some stuff out.
Yeah, cool, man. Yeah, it's getting going around here again pretty good, man. I mean, it's a little slow still, and it's not what it once was, but, um, I'm positive about it. I think it's coming back,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah,
So,
man. I mean, I'm really optimistic about it. I'm sure there's still some stuff to go through for the winter, but
yeah,
it's I'm sure we're gonna work it out, and shows are still gonna be going strong. I mean, it's part of what gets people through stuff like this. Like the whole pandemic and everything. I feel like looking forward to the shows is what helped me get through a lot of it.
yeah, and practicing too, like not just practicing drums, but studying and research during the pandemic, man. I actually didn't enjoy not working for a year, but I enjoyed the space to catch up to some stuff that I before was too busy to deal with. It just takes a long time to start to relearn or learn something new. I don't want to just brush over it.
Yeah.
So I got some new stuff going on from that experience, although I sure as hell missed playing.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I was going to ask this later, but I guess I'll ask it now because it's so relevant. Like for me personally in the past year or two, especially with the pandemic, like on electric bass, I've found myself diving a lot more into playing with my thumb and, getting into more like odd techniques that I just wasn't really using before just on regular gigs. Do you find that, now you still dive into a lot of new things like that, or do you find yourself like digging deeper into the things that you have studied for a long time?
I think it's kind of both. I'm digging deeper into my already kind of the bag that I have somewhat under my hands and feet as far as a drummer and mind as far as an improviser but at the same time, yeah, I'm like changing grips, I'm changing tuning, I'm like messing around with stuff. I'm messing around with beats that I haven't done in years. I'm not really interested in beats. It always sounds shallow. Hey man, come up with a beat. I'd rather fill out a piece of music creatively in the way I feel it works, and have some room for experimentation. But I've been making up beats again, man.
Yeah.
and yeah, and it's fun. I changed my attitude about it's confining and switched into, hey, this is fun. What's the difference anyway? I mean, meaning, hey, we don't eat the same breakfast every morning, so we don't have to play the same stuff every day, so it's cool, and I'm going down to Jazz Fest with the Headhunters in November in New Orleans, and we have quite a few. We have two Jazz Fest Headhunters gigs. I have a Donald Harrison gig at Snug Harbor, and then Will Blades, the great organ player, has hired me, Bill Summers, and Donald Harrison to do a hit. I'm going to put all this up on my website today or tomorrow as soon as I have time. I have some students today, and then maybe tonight I'll start reorganizing my website, which sometimes becomes a real pain. But meaning, so I haven't played funk in a long time, and with these Headhunters gigs and some of these other things, we're gonna be doing the funky thing, but loose, Adrice style and Dr. Lonnie style, open.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to those gigs. I sort of threw my hat back in the ring on the funk side again, which I haven't done in 20 years, man. Little Headhunters here and there for the bread, but nothing. Creatively, my head wasn't really there. I've been playing all this bebop in New York, and it's been glorious.
Yeah, I mean, I know that I've seen you post before talking about how passionate you are about more like the straight ahead swing feel, but obviously you're so well known as like a legendary funk drummer, and feel wise you're one of my favorites. But I did want to ask, is there like, if you had to forego those styles and just some hypothetical alternate reality, is there another style of drumming that you really identify with?
I think post-bop, kind of like what McCoy and those guys were doing, and Herbie, not the Herbie I played with, but the previous, I think that's really where for me, as a kid, I listened to Charlie Parker and Max and everybody, but as a young teen and in my early 20s, what was going on with all those blue notes. So that's like where I really did the majority of my work in listening and shedding. It was all geared to all of those records, man. I had hundreds of them, not thousands, but I had all of them. Lee Morgan, you know, you name it, I had it, man. And all Art Blakey stuff. And so I think that's still, to me, sounds fresh and new when I play that style.
Yeah.
You know, I do it my way. I don't sound like those guys, but that was to me, that still excites my brain. My brain chemicals light up when I hear that music, as if I'd never heard it before, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, man.
So on the topic of like the funk again, I mean, I'm personally a huge fan of the music that's come out of Oakland. I mean, you and Paul Jackson, Tower of Power, musicians that have come from there like Raphael Sadiq and Sheila E. Would you say that a lot of the sound that became associated with Oakland was an innovation by those artists, or can you trace it back even further to older artists that influenced them?
Well, I can trace it back to the older artists that influenced me, because I'm one of those guys that was in on the ground floor of the whole thing, and I know, before I answer that, let me just put this out there. I'm sure you know about this, but David Garibaldi, Greg, Michael Shreve, and Lenny White and I have a group of people. We call ourselves the Stick People, and we interview Larry, all kinds of people. Antonio Sanchez, Billy Cobb, and we just, speaking of Oakland, we just interviewed Larry Graham, and then we have videos of us just talking trash. And but I know I'll say this. Most of the kind of, I had never heard David Garibaldi. And now I knew Sheila, but she was 10 years old. And because I played in Pete's band, her father's band, and she played great drums at 10. And I think David Garibaldi, and if I may be bold enough to add my own name to this equation, pretty much made the Oakland funk thing popular. We didn't even call it anything. That was just how we played. Now, I'd never heard David, so when Garibaldi and I heard each other, we were both like, what? It's not that we're that similar. We're actually not. I come from a big jazz background. I didn't play funk until way after I was a professional jazz drummer, And he got out of the big band in the service, and pretty much within a year or so was playing with the Tower. So we're two different animals, but I love his innovation, and I love his genius. He's a great drummer and a great guy. But for me, what I did was I took all the Philly Joe, Elvin Jones, Tony, Max, Stem Woodyard, just about all the guys that I grew up listening to, and I moved different parts of their, like when they were trading 4s or 8s or a drum solo, I would take bits and pieces of things that I heard in their solos, just little bits, like a bar here, maybe 2 bars, maybe 4, and I would orchestrate them across a 16th note thing for the groove, not for the solo. And I would take a bit of this and a bit of that and place it on different parts of the instrument, like a few notes on the bass drum, a few in the snare, a few in the hi-hat. And they, instead of happening with the independence thing, like one hand working against the other, I mean, there was some of that, but most of it was striking at a different time. And that was what, when I started doing that, people started sending me, oh man, that's that Oakland thing.
Yeah.
And, I didn't have it attached to any particular town, but I lived in Oakland. Soon thereafter, I heard David, and I was like, wow, here's a guy that's thinking the same way. And we were the two guys. And then the next thing you know, man, a bunch of guys started playing like that, and it became the sound of the rhythm sections of the city of Oakland, not San Francisco.
Yeah.
And I mean, there were, of course, guys in San Francisco that would come over and join us. And it became popular once we made those records. And then everybody started, that's that Oakland thing. And so, also, I was listening to Clyde Stubblefield and Jabbo and Melvin Parker for years. And I played I moved to Texas for a while, and I played a ton of blues gigs. So I got my shuffle together,
Yeah.
And I would incorporate, and, when I grew up, rhythm and blues was on the AM radio. That's what you listened to. Jackie Wilson, the Miracles. This is before James Brown got popular,
Yeah.
And Robert Palmer, just Little Richard, all these. So that was my grade school music and also my high school music. So when I played a dance, we used to play the dance bands, and we played Duke Ellington, Count Basie, Benny Goodman, and then it turned into playing this kind of stuff for the kids. So then, like I said, I did have some experience playing this stuff, and I always had my own way of doing it because I was a jazz guy and I had good chops, so I could do these beats without really having to learn them. I could hear it and copy it right away. It wasn't a problem.
Yeah.
And when I moved to Texas, I played a hell of a lot of blues gigs, and so all of that information right there, coupled with Art Blakey, Elvin, everything that I heard that I love, Tootie Heath, Mickey Roker. Oh, and let's not leave out Mr. Red Clay, Lenny White, my dear friend, who also influenced. He was coming out to the Bay Area to play with a group called Azteca, and so he was influencing us on the jazz side, and we were influencing him on the funk side. Michael Shreve, Lenny, myself, Greg Arico, all of these guys Lenny was checking out,
Yeah.
And so he took some of our stuff and ran it through his sensibility. And it was a very creative time. We were all coming up with grooves and ideas and new ways of look. A lot of it was inspired by Tony Williams, but these weren't jazz gigs. Like when I went with Herbie, he said, "No, Mike." When I started playing like my fake Tony stuff, which I was really trying to be Tony Williams because I was young and didn't know any better. And even though I had a lifetime of bebop behind me, everybody jumped on Tony's thing when it became popular. So I tried to do that in the funk thing, and so did Dave Garibaldi. Yeah. So Dave and I always had that thing in common. Hey, man, I see you took that Tony thing and put it on the hi-hat, but we were putting backbeats in it, see?
Yeah.
So that's how. Anyway, it was sort of a long-winded thing. Sorry, but that's how it went down.
No, I love hearing about it. Like I said, that's one of my, the history behind that sound, the records that fall into that, category. I love to hear about them. I love to hear where they come from. So it's so cool to hear about. And I just love kind of talking about the concept behind different rhythm players' grooves, whether it's drummers, bassists, especially like funky guitarists or keyboardists, whatever it is, I love thinking about it. And, I wanted to ask you also, like, when it comes to a groove, whether you're swinging or you're playing something really funky, like, how much would you say that a player's ability to groove is like a natural thing or something that they learn, and how much of it would you say is like subjective versus objective?
Well, for a lot of us, it's natural because, it was natural for me. I'm not saying I just came out as a 4-year-old grooving my butt off, no. But, when you heard Basie live, my dad would take me to hear Louis Armstrong, Louis Prima, Count Basie, Duke Ellington, Jane Krupa, whoever but this is before I got into bebop. And, but this is so the sound of the bass and the drums, rocking the floor and making everybody feel it. That was the whole meat and potatoes. I mean, I didn't even think about the chops or the solos. It was great. You'd be like, oh man, that guy's great. But really, you go to hear Sonny Payne, and what you're hearing is that floor is shaking with groove, man, shuffles and swing, and you're like, damn, you know. Same with Ray Charles. You're listening to those records when you're a kid. It's the groove that gets you. We didn't even call it a groove. We didn't call it anything. It just blew our minds. You know what I mean? And that's the. So if you don't have that type of feeling naturally, and even if you do, even if you're, or let's say, rather than that, if you're drawn to that type of feeling, that the funk and the grease and the blues really rattles your soul in a deep place, even then you got to work on it, man. Yeah. You know what? You got to hone it down and get it sitting right, and not to the degree where it's neurotic, but to the degree where it feels good. You know, and because you want to, as a drummer, you want to encourage the band. You don't want to lay down the law so heavy. It's like, hey, man, I know where it's at. I don't do that. I try to play from a point of encouragement to make people feel as good about this stuff as I do, if possible, you know. And so it took a lot of work, too. I mean, I kind of had it natural. I could strike those grooves without knowing how, kind of as a child, but then I got better at it, like you do anything.
Yeah. So when it comes to practicing those things and learning different styles and developing, where would you say that you fall on the philosophy of people say you can either be, you know, like a jack of all trades, or really like honing on specific things, and obviously that's a spectrum. You know, some people, even if they've got one really like tight thing in their bag, it spills over into other things. But would you encourage players to reach for a lot of different things they like, or do you think it's more important to focus on very specific goals and very specific ideas of what they like?
Well, that's a heck of a question. Thank you for asking. That's a tough one, because if a guy or a girl is naturally able to play a lot of diverse stuff. Like I can't play a lot of diverse stuff, but I can play big band, I can play bebop, I can play post-bop, and I can play funk from any level, from jump music till now. So, but that's not that wide of a thing, range, really, because there's guys that can do all that and play great Latin stuff, you know?
Yeah.
So I say this, it used to be called, we didn't used to call it versatile. It used to be called making a living. When you're, I mean, at one point you had to be able to cut a lot of stuff to stay alive, and nobody had the time or the privilege to be able to go like, well, I just do this. Now, some people had good fortune and they loved to play jazz, and they were discovered as a jazz artist right away when they were young, and that was the end of it. They never had to deal with that. But my thing wasn't, I was fortunate, and I was always working with great artists, and I was always working, but I had to play a lot of different stuff, you know, in order to keep that up. And also, I very seldom said no to a gig unless I didn't care for the music or the money was lousy. And so I accepted gigs that were above my pay grade as far as being able to cut them. And I was good enough natural drummer to be able to do an okay job. And from that, I would meet the people in the bands and learn how to do a great job, you know, or aspire to do a great job. So that was people in those days were giving me advice. Plus, I would go to see Art Blakey. I'd go to see all the great drummers, and I'd talk to them and try to get whatever I could, try to glean whatever I could from them, how they sat, how they tuned their drums, how they moved their hands, the whole damn thing, how they walked, how they talked, all of it. And through that activity, I found me, you know.
Yeah.
So, but I don't know whether you can do that anymore. Like mainly I would say if you play, I always tell people my best advice is to play with other human beings. So you're not just doing a chop thing in the drum room or the bass room or the whatever room, you know? And but in those days we worked. This is no exaggeration. 5 to 7 nights a week for 45 years. So we could and we practiced during the daytime and went to each other's house if we had different kind of music that we wanted to play other than what we were doing on a gig. And so it was constant engagement year after year. So I learned by playing with the bands more than paradiddles in a drum room, you know. So that was my thing, you know. I don't the advantage. A lot of people trash music schools now. Oh well, that's that stiff. I don't know, man. There's human beings in there that you can play with every day. You know, everybody's trapped in there together. You know, like, so you can really learn to play probably a lot of different styles, you know, with people.
Yeah, I get what people say about the schools being lacking in certain departments when it comes to like really getting a well-rounded education. But I feel like the main thing is that they give you the tools so that as long as you have the attitude to go after the things to learn, that
Sure.
you can at least access it through the college and the community around the college.
Yeah, I think that's a great. I dig it. I didn't. That wasn't a popular thing. I had to kind of. I mean, I had to. I went on the road right after high school. They would have. I could have gone to American River Junior College as a drummer. And now they got a great band and great teachers out there, but the band was pitiful when I went there. And so a guy offered me a gig in the mid '60s, '65, for $300 for $250 or $300 a week on the road. So I took off. My mother even said, "No, man, don't go to school. That's more money than my parents made." You know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I took off, and I've been working I never looked back. But I do, when I have students that have the college background, I do see where I'm lacking in things, you know. And I'm like, man, I'm too old now, I think. But man, I don't have the time because of my schedule. But I wouldn't mind going to music school, and you know,
Yeah.
I mean, wow, man. You know, I mean, these kids, my students read better than I ever am going to read in this lifetime. Because they've been doing it in these schools, and they have all that big band experience. You can't get that on the street too easily anymore.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, I feel like the more you know, the more you don't know. It's like they say, you know, it's there's always so much more, you know, in music or in any art. But I mean, like, I'm the same way. You know, I see examples of reading that I'm not sure I could ever aspire to. You know, you hear about like you hear about, say, Vinnie Colaiuta going into audition for like Frank Zappa and sight reading insane charts, or like the kind of, when I hear guys talking in the city about some of the charts that new you know, artists are bringing into like places like Smalls, and how complex they're getting with the arrangements. I mean, I feel like there's just, the sky's the limit when it comes to breaking down things even as seemingly simple as the notes on the page.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have that kind of a background, and I've had to. Now, if I can take a chart home overnight, or like let's say we have a rehearsal on Thursday and the gig is Saturday, I have a day or two to look things over, then I'm cool. I read good enough to do that. But if I have to go in and read where they're going to show me very complicated dot and tide figures in different time systems, and then also they're going to tell me what drum and what cymbal to hit and all that, well, man, then I got to look at that for a minute. I can't walk in and cut that. I've never even thought about that.
Yeah.
You know, I never thought about music in those terms. And sometimes when I hear those guys playing those complicated arrangements, I play with Brand X, man. That stuff was extremely complicated. So I can do it. I can teach myself to do it. I'm not completely blind as far as reading, and I can use enough savvy to figure things out, because I've been challenged a lot. But when I'm in the audience and I hear some of that, I'm not a big fan of that stuff, man. It usually doesn't swing, and I'm thinking, why? Why would you want to do that? I mean, I'd rather hear a cat play 32 bars and swing his butt off, man, myself. You know what I mean? Like, but I suppose if you're in that bag and you like that style, then and you're really good at it, then of course you're going to want to use it. You're not going to want to not use it. So I understand that too. For me, it's not a big, I'm not all about it. I never really listened to Zappa very much. Vinnie Colaiuta's a genius, so we'll get that one out of the way, right?
Oh yeah, no question.
Not just reading wise, like his whole scene, but yeah, some guys can do that, and I think, and I notice about some of my students, some of them actually have a talent for that, just like I do for swinging or something. They just get it.
Yeah.
They can jot I'll play some difficult passages, and they're writing it down almost as fast as I can play it, almost. And I'm like, well, how do you even do that? And he goes, well, they're just trained like that,
Yeah.
Now, I dig that. I'd like to have that. That would be cool.
Yeah, it's crazy to think about. It's one of those things, I similarly, I feel like I've spent a good amount of time with written music, but there's still, like I said, like the sky's the limit. There's so much you could dive deeper into it that it's just crazy to think about.
It is.
But as one more stylistic, groove-oriented thing I wanted to delve into quick, much like the Oakland sound, you deserve a lot of props in the hip hop community because some of your drumming, especially tracks like "God Made Me Funky," I mean that stuff is some of the heaviest sampled stuff in hip hop, especially in the early days. And I was wondering, do you remember when you first started hearing your music sampled, or when you first started hearing hip hop come around?
Well, I remember when there was a guy named Dougie Fresh that was a hip hop artist.
Oh, he's
a rap artist.
Legend. One of my favorites.
Well, yeah, I used to live in Harlem. He lived a few blocks from me, and somehow I'd meet this guy, and I realized that he used finally somebody said, hey, I said, hey, man, I met this cat, Dougie Fresh, and yeah, you're on some of his tracks. And I'm like, wait a minute, what? And then from that, I went out with Herbie Hancock for a year in 1999, I think, or 98, something like that. And one of his money man, I guess, somebody who handles the business aspect of his stuff, became a friend of mine, and we were talking. He said, yeah, man, did you know that God Make Me Funky is seriously sampled by NWA, like Dre, I guess, is that guy.
Yeah.
And I at this point in the late 80s and 90s, I was completely immersed in New York. The thing about New York is you can have a really great career right here in New York playing jazz, and you're not going to get famous. Nobody will even know what you're doing, but you're so happy because you're playing damn near every night,
Yeah.
And so I was in that. I was completely submerged in this scene here, and unless I go to Europe and stuff like that, but that was all jazz too. So I didn't really listen to rap or hip hop. I mean, I'd hear it here and there, but I didn't pay much attention to it. And then they called it to my attention on this Herbie gig I was on. The guy did. And I found out that we were seriously sampled. Now, we've never had a payday. We've had several lawyers try to unwind it. We have a guy looking at it now. So Vibe Magazine, somebody wanted to do an interview with me from Vibe Magazine. And I'm like, okay, sure. So nice cat. So we're talking. And he says, oh, man, you must be really honored that your drumming has such a strong presence in the hip-hop community. It doesn't anymore. There's a whole different thing going on now, but this was during that time period. And I remember, and they printed this in Vibe. I said, well, I dug the cred, but I'd rather have the bread. Me and your daughter, all those cats ripped us off,
Yeah.
Is it Ice-T or Ice Cube? One of those cats, that kind of sick dude, not the guy that plays the cop, but the movie star guy. All those cats in that scene burned us. They took our stuff and never paid us a dime, never asked us about it. I just found out we're on Maria Maria, my drums for Santana. I didn't know that either. Nobody has brought that to my attention. And if you go to Who Samples Who and bring my name up, or better yet, the Headhunters, you'll see that we've really been sampled to death.
Yeah, like hundreds, if not thousands.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen those pages online. It's that those tracks are like, there's just never ending like lists of where they pop up, and even when it's subtle.
Nobody's ever asked me the permission or any of us, and we've never. So it's really weird, and of course there's a statute of limitations and all, and then a bunch of legal BS when you try to talk to guys about it. Nobody wants to take it on in commission, but my retirement would be up in there. That's for sure. Not, yeah. I mean, I'm going to play till I die if I'm lucky anyway. But I mean, I'm playing because I love playing, but I'm also working still. I'm making money. I'm making a living. And if I had they had to pay us, I could chill out a little taste.
Yeah. Well, like I said,
but anyway, it is what it is.
Yeah.
Good.
I mean, like I said, you've had such an impact on that style, that history of that side of music. So, I mean, I think there's a lot of credit due there from those artists. But it is such a beautiful thing to see the way they flip the songs and like create something new out of them. I mean, do you have a particular favorite? Have you heard a sample of yours that you particularly liked the treatment of, or have you not dug into that so much?
I haven't dug into it so much, but I've definitely heard most of a lot of the stuff that we've been sampled, and I definitely don't hate hip hop or anything like that. Like, I hear things all the time. Yeah, I don't know which one it was, but I was watching a movie one time and I heard I said, man, that's got to be me, and it turned out it was. I forget which group, but it was killing. I mean, what they did to it was great. What they did to it was better than what I did to it. They made it sound better than it was. I admit it. I liked it, man.
Yeah.
So it was cool. But once again, like for that movie, Straight Outta Compton, they contacted us and wanted to use God Make Me Funky. And it was a small amount of money, like $35,000 to be split between 5 cats. And we said, sure, man. At this point, we just wanted some justice. And so they were already signed the contract. And the last minute, we stopped hearing from them. They put the movie out. And there's a place where the guy that plays Dre hands his buddy an album of Survival of the Fittest, which is where they got God Make Me Funky from.
Yeah.
And but they didn't play the track, so they didn't have to pay us. So it's a constant stamp.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Damn.
And they don't owe us because they didn't use it, but it just shows you if somebody like Sony or whoever put that movie out a huge. No wonder they got so much money, man. You know what I mean? They can afford to keep putting out art because they rip off artists.
Yeah.
So.
Well, yeah, like I said, the credit's due. I mean, the influence is just it's right there to see. But it's so I hope as you continue to pursue the legal side of it, you get your what's due. But obviously, on just the legacy of it, there's so much credit to be given. But I'm
not. Don't get me wrong. I'm not bitter. I'm having a great career and a great life. I'm one of the lucky guys, man.
Yeah.
But to not say anything about it would also be immoral.
Yeah.
Okay, if you're going to burn me, all right, fine, but I'm going to say something.
Yeah, no, I mean, I still love hip-hop, but I get where you're coming from. It's just interesting to hear about, it's interesting to hear it straight from the origin, Yeah,
sure. I'm sure it is interesting to hear. I mean, it's like I hear other guys that have had a similar experience. And then I know other guys that recorded another guy's tune and another guy's record, and they were sampled, and they got big paychecks, and it's not even their tune, and they took it from another guy's record. They didn't steal it like a jazz artist would. Oh, let's play this tune by so-and-so on my new record.
Yeah.
And they would. And so it goes down fortune is a fleeting thing. You never know, how things are going to roll. I might meet the right guy, and he might know how to confront these companies and get a settlement or something. You never know.
Yeah. Well, I do have to wrap up shortly, but there's one last topic I want to touch on because I do this a lot. You know, I mostly have musical guests on the show, but I also have some comedians on sometimes, and I'm a huge stand-up comedy nerd. And I would love to hear if if you have any particular relationship to comedy or particular comedians that really have touched you, like on an artistic level. I mean, what are your feelings about the current state of stand-up comedy and stand-up comedy as an art?
Well, I had a girlfriend named Angela Scott who was a comedian. We went together for years and are still very, very good friends. And she warmed up for Cosby the whole time he had the Huxtable thing on TV.
Really?
She did yeah, and she also did the Comedy Cellar and the Comedy This and the Comedy Store and the da-da-da-da-da, and that one right down the street from the Iridium on 53rd or whatever. So I would go to hear her. She'd open up for Bill. She would open up for Paul Mooney, and I met Paul Mooney. I love Paul Mooney.
Oh, rest in peace. One of the greats.
Oh my man, I'd be on the floor crying, man. It would be hysterical. And then Sarah Silverman would be on the show, and she was, man, she had some
phenomenal.
Yeah, totally. And then there were some new comics who I've later seen on some of the comedy jams who weren't popular when I first saw them. Like, I'd be playing the Iridium, and I go down there after the gig because I know Angela would be down there, and we'd check out whoever. And I saw some great. As far as what's going on now since the pandemic, I haven't even thought about it, But I do watch. What's her name? She blew up in that movie that happened in New Orleans where everybody got drunk, and she has her own comedy thing. She's from L.A. Tiffany.
Oh, Tiffany Haddish.
Yeah, man, she had a comedy show on HBO or on one of the network. It was, man, I heard some killer comics, old comics and new ones that were smoking, man. And then who's the big guy? I really love him. I'm having a senior moment, and he passed away.
Patrice O'Neal?
No. Him and Cedric, the Entertainer, usually came together. And great,
yeah, I know who you're talking about.
I can't believe I can't think of this man's name. He's hysterical, man.
One sec. I almost got it.
It would be a sin for me not to. I should look it up online because
Bernie Mac, right?
Oh man, Bernie Mac. Sorry, I couldn't remember. My bad. Listen, man. I've been on the floor crying watching that. Do you remember that one where he did about that one routine about the little girl that come downstairs and he was like, "Make your move. You want, like he wanted to fight."
No, I don't think I've heard it.
Oh man, yeah, she was challenging him about the peanut butter where or something, and he's like, bust a move, go on, bust a move, oh man, this cat was so screaming, man. And also when I was in L.A., I went to a ton of comedy clubs and heard some brilliant artists that, man, I don't know who they were. They weren't famous, but I love doing that as well. That can really be a lot of fun, man.
Yeah, I mean, I love to hear, non-comedians' takes on it. I mean, music's the main thing for me, but about 4 months ago, I started going to open mics and just playing around with stand-up comedy as a thing for fun. And like I said, I'm a huge nerd about it, so I always love to hear, what people are into and what they're, people who aren't really involved with it, what their experience is with it.
Did you get on stage and do a routine in front of people?
Yeah, I've gone up and performed about 45 times now. Woo! So it's my new little side thing aside from playing bass.
That's fantastic, man. Do you know there's a great jazz piano player named George Colligan? Plays with Buster Williams. He did some stand-up for a while, and this dude I went to see him one night, and he was killing, man. I was like, George, wow.
Really?
He wrote his own stuff out of nowhere and went up. I saw him his first night on stage. He wasn't scared. He was just kind of like, oh, what the hell? And, man, he was great, but then he sort of blew it off, I guess. I haven't heard that where he did that anymore. But, yeah, it's all – and musicians led such a whack lifestyle usually that his comedy can be pretty damn good. You know what I mean? Like, we've seen a lot of life what we
Yeah.
do.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't heard of him. I need to dig into some of that, but I've heard of other musicians doing it. You know, I have friends of friends down in the city who do things like that, and I can't remember his name. Ira Coleman was telling me about this one guy over in Europe who would do a lot of that. Like, he was a pianist who would do a lot of comedy routines, but his name is escaping me right now. I'm trying to remember.
Well, it might be Michael Wolf. Michael Wolf was really good at that. He did a lot of comedy from the piano. And I was on the gigs, and then he kind of, even when I do shows with him now, he doesn't really do stand-up, but we're playing like some serious, what we consider some serious jazz stuff. But he'll add some of that stuff into his show, and his delivery is really good.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
Yeah, I love that kind of thing. I mean, you know, I don't know that I would necessarily want to mix the music and the comedy, like, together at the same time, but I love the idea of shows that incorporate both. You know, you get some music and then some followed by some comedy, and it's just two of my favorite things. So if I can get both of them in one night, I mean, I'm having a great time.
Well, there's some guy, Mike used to work the Comedy Store here, and he knows, like, and through Angela, I met Larry David and a whole bunch of these people, man, at parties. I really have, and I was like, wow. And I met him when he was first getting that show on, I guess it's on HBO.
Curb Your Enthusiasm?
Yeah, when he was first, only had a couple of those in the can done. He was just starting, and I met him at a party one night. He knew all about jazz, and I had a nice talk with him. And I met quite a few of those guys that had something going there for a while. An Italian guy. Oh man, who was this cat? He was fantastic, man. I can't. Oh Lord. Yeah, I will never remember his name, but he would imitate Tina Turner and Cher singing opposite each other, man, and it was absolutely right on and a scream. This cat was burning, man. You know what I mean?
Yeah, man. Well, listen, I mean, I could talk about this stuff forever, but I do got to wrap it up because we're hitting the time. I got to fit it into the show the right way when I put it together. But once again, Mic Drop. It's Mike Clark with Michael Zilber, Matt Clark, and Peter Barchet. And can you give the rundown of all the other stuff you got coming up, Mike?
Well, yeah, I got, like I say, I got another record that I'm on. I'm with Leon Dorsey. It's called Freedom Jazz Dance, and it'll be out on Jazz One label, and it comes out the 22nd of August. And then if you go to, like, my website's not up to date, but I'm going to do it tonight or tomorrow. It'll have my dates coming up. I'm doing Jazz Fest in New Orleans. I'm going out with the Mic Drop Band in November to California. I'm going to play SF Jazz, Kooumba, which is in Santa Cruz, California. SF Jazz is obviously in San Francisco. And then we're going to do Bach Dynamite and Dancing, which is a great jazz venue in Half Moon Bay, California. So I'm looking forward to a good year of stuff. You know, I got some nice things on the books. I just now am finishing another record with a guy named Kevin Harris, a singer, and that has Jerry Z, great blues guitar player, Danny Dreyer. I don't know if you know of Danny. He's wonderful. And myself and Donald Harrison.
Awesome.
And Will Lee on bass. How dare I forget that? Oh,
damn. Okay.
Hey, the grooves are nasty. And you know what? We re-recorded Hair, the Larry Graham song. And on the Stick People, we interviewed Larry the other day, which will be coming out, and I was talking to him about it, and what a great cat he is. So I'm looking forward to the Stick People Larry Graham interview from Graham's, the great bassist from Graham Central Station. He explains how and why he plays the way he does. It's fascinating, bro. That one you got to check out.
Oh, I can't wait to listen, man. I can't wait to listen. That sounds awesome.
And we have another one with Stanley Clark. If you heard, you might want to check that one out. That's pretty bad. He gives up a lot of info, too.
Damn, man. I got to check it out. For the listeners, if you need a new podcast, Stick People.
On YouTube.
Yeah. Well, it's thank you so much again, Mike. It's so great talking to you. It's really an honor, and I really appreciate it. I can't wait to hear more of the stuff coming out.
My honor, Brad. Thank you for calling me, brother, and I'll see you around, okay? Maybe at one of these comedy jams.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, man.